All right, wait. Chair Hauser, you are now live in just a few seconds.
Well, how can we confirm the Vedilla trust without his signature? Yeah, like.
Chair Hauser, you now can begin.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for November 4th. Planning and Zoning Commission will hear public comments only on items that appear on the agenda. Presentations by the public will be limited to no more than 10 minutes for the main spokesperson for the group and no more than 3 minutes for other individuals. Additional information may be conveyed to the Planning and Zoning Commission in written form. You want to do roll call or?
There's one girl.
Proceed.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was sending Carl his link. So Chairman Hauser,
Here.
Vice Chair Archibald,
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Here.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Here.
Commissioner Kuhn, Commissioner Kuhn. Okay, I'll come back to him. Commissioner Levi.
Here.
And it looks like Commissioner Kilgore is absent. Did I miss anybody? All right, Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Very good, and I expect Mr. Kuhn will join us momentarily. Our first item is approval of minutes from the October 7th meeting.
I move to approve the meeting minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Do we want to go one by one on these?
Were there any nays? Did we ask for any nays? Okay, we'll just say it's unanimous.
Yes.
6 out of the 6 members present.
Okay, next item is consideration of a proposed zoning text amendment to Chapter 7 of the Unified Development Ordinance, amending Articles 2, 3, 5, 8, 9, and 17 in order to adopt new standards regulating hotels. The planner coordinating review is Stacy Merton and Shannon Tuck, and this is continued from last month's meeting.
Okay, I do have a quick update. I have a few slides just to share with you, just to update you on the council presentation. But as Shannon said, we will actually be continuing the hearing until next month. Hold on a second, and I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so thank you all for being here tonight. Here we continue. As I said, we'll have, I guess we'll have the vote at the end of my presentation to continue the hearing. Just wanted to give you a quick update on the council review. So one of the things that we talked about was just the overall, obviously we talked about everything with them, but one of the things that they asked us to look at was the process for actually amending the overlay. And what you might remember that we had like 2 processes. We had one where you would actually have a, anybody could go for a conditional zoning, but we also had an option where you could just amend the map and then it could possibly go back through the administrative process. So the council just thought that was too confusing, and they asked us just to eliminate that process so that they wouldn't have to worry about looking at a site plan versus the overall map. So the staff was completely okay with that. So I think that was a simple yes, we're going to change that process. So this new template kind of shows the revised process. Then they also asked us, we had talked about the council threshold at 100 feet, which is in the ordinance, but they had also asked us to look at a room threshold trigger. And so we are considering, again, we'll have more information to share with you, more detailed information to share, but we are looking at a room threshold that what we're trying to do is equate it back to something more that would be equivalent to what a level 3 project would be. So somewhere in the 100 to 115 room area is what we're looking at. So we're continuing to evaluate that. There were a lot of suggestions about amendments to the map itself. And I'm happy to share the map with you if you want to look at these in more detail. Is there a consensus for folks to do that tonight? Would that be helpful as I go through these? Let me do that.
I was going to say I'd like to, Ms. Merton, because I have some questions about the map as well. So either now or later.
Okay. Come on. Oops. Whoops. Are you all seeing? Okay. Are you all seeing the map now?
Not yet.
Nope.
No? Are you seeing it now?
No.
No.
You want me to
You
share
just
mine?
still see. Try one more time. Now are you seeing it?
No.
Stacy, why don't you let Vedilla try?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. Vedilla, maybe you could pull it up. Let me stop presenting.
Here it comes. You should see it now.
There it is.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened.
Thank you.
So some of the major map items that we discussed. Let's start with the Asheville Mall area. So there was a concern that because we don't have the urban centers in place currently for the Asheville Mall, that anything to require like mixed use development, that this was a big parcel to include in the overlay. And there was a concern that we would have like a single use on this site. So we were asked to pull this from the map and then consider adding it to our urban centers rezoning efforts. Probably you all may or may not be aware, but this was actually identified not as an urban center, but as a town center on the future land use map. So we would probably want to still tweak the urban center zoning a little bit to be more robust, to actually bring about the type of development that we would want to see here. But we tend to agree that removing this from the overlay map until we get that zoning in place probably does make sense. So that's what we're considering at this time. Are there any questions about that?
Since Vedilla's on here, is there any time frame on that rezoning, urban place rezoning?
We are moving that forward right now. We've kind of run into a little bit of a roadblock with some of the communities, and we're going to be, actually there's a PED meeting where we're going to be discussing that next week. Vedilla, you want to add anything to that?
Just that we're working on getting council to adopt the revisions to open space standards, which the Urban Centers Initiative depend on. And that is going to council in December for a vote of approval in January. So probably shortly after that, you guys will see urban centers.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we know that, because of the bankruptcy filing, I guess, of the Asheville Mall, we realize that this is a hotter area than probably we originally thought last week. So we do want to move this along quickly.
Didn't Ingalls just buy the old Asheville Mall? Or is that the old Innsbruck Mall? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
My mistake.
Right.
This property, this large property here.
And that's already not included in the overlay.
So would the hotel overlay be in conflict with the town center district guidelines?
No, it's not in conflict with the town center. It is the urban center future land use category does not contemplate lodging uses as part of it, but the town center future land use category does. So it would not be in conflict with that. Any other questions about that? There is an area south of the river there, which I guess Councilwoman Whistler was okay with including in, but the staff feels like if we're going to take this out, we would take out the entire area that was contemplated for town center and then add it back at such time that we introduce that new zoning to that area.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I almost wonder if, and this is probably a bigger one. I just listened to the last council work sessions on hotels this afternoon. That whole, I can't remember, what is that? River Hills, is that what that one is?
I think that's called River Hills, yeah.
Like, this may be bigger than trying to get the urban place through now, but I wonder if that isn't right for that urban place zoning designation as well, because, it kind of started off, 15 or 20 years ago, whenever they did that, it was kind of something, and now it's it's going downhill quickly, and I wonder if it needs maybe a little boost and also just with the neighborhoods and everything around it, like to have that transition, allowing South Tunnel Road to continue a little bit up in towards, Oakley without, certainly without hotels for sure. Without
hotels. So you're saying urban center, not town center.
Yes, I'm thinking that, if that Asheville Mall area were to go to the urban center, then that part there that you've got circled, or that Vedilla has circled right now with the River Hills, would go to the same as well. Maybe. I don't know. But not hotels.
Okay. Okay, we'll make a note of that. All right, now we're going to swing around to downtown, Vedilla, if you don't mind. So another area that came up with the council was on the east side of town, removing the east of South Charlotte Street between Woodfin and College. So that's kind of a big chunk there on the east side of downtown. Thanks, Vedilla. And there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about that, but we had pulled, I know there was lots of community concern about the new hotel going in right before the tunnel, and staff had pulled back that corner a little bit, and so this would just be pulling it back a little bit more. And it, I think we're comfortable with that, unless we heard some major concerns from you all. And then the other area was the Harris Cherokee Center that came up. I guess, it's staff's thinking was that area around it could be developed. And again, we were trying not to just have, big holes in the map. But we understand that the council, doesn't think that the Civic Center would be redeveloped for a hotel. So we are considering taking that area out as well. And that would be kind of where the historic district kind of dips down adjacent to the interstate, right north of town.
Was there any discussion, and I can't remember, even though I did just listen to it, about making that blue area there that Vedilla just circled into small hotels? I mean, you know, there is a hotel there right now. It's called condos, but that was a hotel.
Right. There wasn't. I do not recall any discussion with council about that. I don't think there are any, like, one of our ideas when we use the historic district boundaries to designate or to sort of align with small hotels is that we might see some adaptive reuse of some of those buildings. I mean, we've heard from hoteliers that it's very, very unlikely that they would build a new small hotel. So I think, and I don't think there's any buildings on any of that. It's parking lots and the Civic Center, the Harris Cherokee Center. I mean,
yeah.
But we could look a little bit closer to see if there's potential to expand that, but I don't think that there is.
I mean, I would just wonder, like, you know, maybe pipe dream idea that somebody may want to redevelop that site and have a redevelopment have a part of a hotel, and it wouldn't be, you know, it wouldn't be the hotel be the dominant thing. It would be still a civic center like use, but, you know, hotel for the artists or, you know, whatever, some kind of lodging use.
Yes, actually, we did talk about that. The staff talked about that, and that's definitely an option. So, yeah.
There was a concern that showing this as an area for smaller, large hotels by some can be interpreted as the city's going to be building a hotel there soon. So we wanted to talk this through some more.
Gotcha.
Highlight that specific point, Joe, because you're right. Maybe in 20 years, that would be a great mixed use project.
Yeah.
So if we did that, I still am not sure if we would include the Harris Cherokee Center as part of that, or just some of the parcels around it. But it, you know. But you're right. I mean, I think that was one of the reasons why we included it to begin with, because we were thinking that it could be. It's not that we thought that the center would be redeveloped, but the area around it might be. So that's good feedback, Joe. Thank you. And then any other questions about that spot downtown?
I'm having trouble reading the map. Does that include the Haywood Page project?
The Haywood Page it's really small hotels, right?
It doesn't. Haywood Page is
there. Okay, thank you.
Across the street.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I think I just kind of skipped over the River Ridge Shopping Center. I know we talked a lot about that previously, and I think staff was leaning towards keeping it in for large hotels, but council asked that we specifically take that area out as well. So I just wanted to reiterate that to you all.
Yeah, I was encouraged when I heard the parts there, the discussion about that. And again, I would love Vedilla to include that in the urban place, or, you know, that seems to me to be a right spot for redevelopment to become, you know, similar to hopefully what will happen at the Steinmart up on Merriman.
Well, for whatever reason, as part of the comp plan, it was identified not as an urban center, but as urban corridor. So, you know, we would have to change that future land use if that were to happen.
But, you know, that's okay. I feel like we've gotten a lot of input about that specific spot, that folks do look at it as a kind of an urban center as we would define it otherwise. So, we never really had a really good in-depth conversation about some of the future land use categories. I mean, we did discuss it at P&Z, but not at this level that we're getting into now, especially with the hotel overlay. So that's another area I think that could be looked at in more depth.
In thinking about that, is it possible that the vote for the hotel overlay map could include redefining the future land use map to allow?
It would be separate.
Okay.
But that's okay. I mean, I think kind of like we talked about with the Asheville Mall. I mean, we might, as we make future zoning changes, we may consider amending the hotel overlay district map, right? So we could always do that at a future date as we make zoning changes. So. But I don't think we would do it all at the same time. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
This is Mr. Kuhn. In these areas that currently have a hotel but would not be in the overlay district, if that hotel were to be renovated, is it still a grandfathered use, or does the amount of renovation cause it to then have to upgrade and it would be non-compliance in those areas?
I think Shannon, can you answer that question? The non-conforming ordinance addresses that, correct?
Well, any non-conforming, it won't become more non-conforming. If it's not located in the overlay, it could, if it's not included in the overlay, it would be considered non-conforming. And if you're non-conforming, you can't expand, but you can renovate, you can maintain, you can do all of that. You just can't expand.
Right.
Well, when you say expand, is that number of rooms? Is that square footage? Is that dollar amount of renovation? How is that looked at?
It's not dollar amount. It would basically be an expansion that results in like a higher impact. So it could be the number of rooms. It could be like it may or may not include a physical addition. It kind of just, I hate to say it, but it just sort of depends. There's actually quite a lot of case law about non-conforming uses and their expansions. You can, so for example, you can, if you had a dining area and you wanted to expand your dining area into an area that was already within the footprint of the building, that would not be considered an expansion. But if you're physically adding a dining area that didn't exist before, or if you are adding rooms or things like that, that would be considered an expansion.
And Shannon, can you add about, did we already update the catastrophic loss language, or is that?
We did, yeah. So we had, Asheville had, a lot of cities have a clause that says if you suffer a total loss, so if there's a fire or an earthquake or something, and you can rebuild basically what you had before. Some cities are starting to take those out of the ordinances, and Asheville was one. So for the last 10 years or more, we have not allowed something that was non-conforming, a non-conforming structure to be rebuilt. And in this particular case, we're talking about a non-conforming use. And a non-conforming use can always be reestablished. But if you had a non-conforming structure, we're now revising our ordinance to say, you can actually even reestablish a non-conforming structure. So either way, a hotel would be okay if it were non-conforming in any way. If they had suffered a major loss, they could rebuild what they had.
Right. So that's why we're not as concerned. I mean, we would rather the existing hotels be conforming, but it's not absolutely necessary for them to be in the overlay in order for them to be able to rebuild.
Correct.
And Shannon, you might want to remind everyone, I think that the reason that we were going to, that we did revise that non-conforming use and allow rebuild was because of concerns over the urban center zoning. A lot of the owners who own those parcels wanted to be sure they could continue if something happened to their current use, was burned down, and they could at least rebuild that, even if it was rezoned urban center.
Now, their concerns are primarily about their non-conforming structures. So like, your structure doesn't meet the setbacks, it's too tall, or it's not 2 stories, or things like that. They didn't want to have to rebuild. If they had a 1-story building and the new requirement's 2 stories, they didn't want to have to come back in with a new 2-story building. So those revisions primarily address them. But non-conforming uses, which is what hotels would be in this case, they're always allowed to reestablish once the new structure is built. They have a certain period of time to get the process started, but then once they get it started, they're sort of vested.
Well, and I'll just throw out my concern is that in a lot of cases, hotels will enter into a 99-year lease, and they need to have some assurance that they're going to be able to continue to live out the life of that lease.
Yeah, we have sections of our ordinance that deal specifically with this. And it explains that they do have the right to maintain the use and to make improvements and things of that nature.
Okay. Any other questions? I still have a couple more minor map amendments to talk about, unless you have any other questions about anything we've discussed so far. Okay. So the other was, this has to do more with going for small hotels. One was to revise all of the River Arts District and have it all be for small hotels. Let me just throw that out there. And the other was to expand the area for small hotels to include both sides on the west side of Cox Avenue. So that would be that little blue area between the historic district downtown and then the South Slope. The other thing that they also asked was for us to consider spacing limitations. And I think that combining that with this, the staff is probably leaning more towards not making these changes, just these last 2 changes as far as turning those areas all orange. We feel that if we introduce a spacing limitation with like a 200-foot buffer around hotels, that would probably address some of the concerns there. And we don't want to see, almost virtually everything not be allowed to be a staff review. So we are concerned about that, and that we've put together this whole incentive-based proposal and then to turn around and limit hotels to the extent that everything becomes still as a CZ. So kind of with those things in mind, we are probably not we're not leaning at this time towards making those changes. And one last thing, and we've actually had talked about this as a staff as well, is expanding that on the South Slope along Cox Avenue, the original map, if you could zoom into that area, Vedilla, does not include both sides of Cox Avenue. And so we are looking at expanding the area there. There we go. So just to take in, not going all the way over to Ashland, but at least the areas on the west side of Cox to include in that small overlay. And maybe down just one more parcel. Yep. Thank you. And I don't know if you had a chance, Vedilla threw up the 20 or the 200-foot buffer. You can kind of get an idea of what that would do. And, we've heard a lot from the Downtown Commission and the River Arts folks about the proliferation of hotels in those areas. So if we did introduce the 200-foot buffer, we do think that would help to alleviate some of those concerns. And it still leaves areas for hotels to come in, but not, at the level that a lot of folks in Asheville are concerned about.
Stacy, before you move on, I just wanted to note for the record that Commissioner Kilgore has joined us a few minutes ago. So.
Oh, good. Thank you. So does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the River Arts change. And there was another one that you mentioned. You said staff wasn't going to move forward with those.
Well, what the council had asked us to look at was making all of the River Arts District only for small hotels and not allowing any large hotels. And I guess what I was saying is that we feel like if we, the buffer is showing 200 feet around existing hotels, but if you contemplated that there might be a new hotel in the blue area in the River Arts District, and then think about a 200 buffer around that hotel, it still is going to limit the concentration and the number of hotels if we have this 200-foot buffer. At least it will require those projects to go to council. So we're not leaning towards changing more of the River Arts District to small hotels. And again, I'm going to go back to what I said before. The areas that we've identified for small hotels are primarily historic districts or areas where there's existing buildings that we think could be adaptively reused. So to introduce small hotels, I mean, I think a good point was made that, a hotel could be part of a mixed use project. And so a small hotel or at least up to 35 rooms might be included as part of that. So that is something to take into consideration. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, about the River Arts District, about if you think that we should consider changing some of the blue area to small.
And just to clarify, the spacing requirement would be off of the property lines, right? Not the hotel. So in some cases you have large parcels. So it would,
right.
It would, in some cases, affect a larger area because of the size of the parcel than in other cases.
This is Commissioner Kuhn. How are you defining a hotel? And the reason I ask is there seems to be a movement now where you may have two hotel brands connected to a common parking structure, but they're two independent hotels. And I was just wondering if someone wanted to do a 35 or less rooms and they did one brand on one side and one on the other, they've got 70 hotel rooms. Is that considered two hotels?
I think that it is. Shannon, can you?
Yeah, I think it would depend on the construction. If you had two buildings connected by a structure, another structure like a parking structure, in such a way that the building code would classify it all as one single building, then I think we would look at that as one hotel development.
That's a good point, though, to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah. I mean, you could do it. It just puts you in a different category.
Well, and I'm looking at it, I guess, from a developer's perspective, that there seems to be most hotels are built with about 115 rooms or so, and there has to be some reason for that. And I would think that it's probably economics, that the cost of the land, and if you're going up, adding another floor and adding another 10, 15 rooms, the cost of each additional room is considerably less than starting from the ground up and building a 35-room hotel.
Right.
I got a couple of questions, one about the River Arts, but the first one, this map that you're showing, Vedilla, that doesn't appear to be live off of the hotel website. Will that be live? Like the one I'm looking at it's dated the 25th of August. So
yeah, it will be when we actually release the final map, okay, that when we share with you all, basically for your next meeting.
Okay, yeah.
That's when we make it live, right?
Yeah, so I was curious about that 200-foot buffer thing. I was like, it's not on the one I have.
Yeah, no, these are things that, that we, the staff, have been considering based on the council's feedback. And we're sharing with you to kind of get your feedback before we make it official.
Okay. The question specific to the river, I wonder, and I would be curious to hear what staff says. There's the blue area that's up against 240, Was there a consideration just to make that all small hotels, and then the only place in the river for the large is more, down towards where Wedge Foundation and all of that, the foundation area, I guess. The paper, asphalt waste paper and all that. So that, you don't have this kind of little plop of blue right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that makes a difference. I'm just kind of curious as to perhaps the rationale there.
Well, again, I think what we did is we applied the historic overlay to the kind of the original areas where we felt like hotels would be, and that just fell outside of that. But that's a really good point. It's sort of like a standalone piece, and kind of getting back to what you said before, there could be a mixed use project there that could include a small hotel. So we can look at that a little bit more. Any other thoughts about the map?
Can you zoom back in on the Cox Avenue portion? I know that Vedilla had drawn an extension of it in purple, but it almost initially, when you brought it up, Stacy, it sounded like you wanted the two blue portions to connect.
No, what I was saying is that the council asked for the blue portion sort of in the middle of downtown and South Slope to possibly be all orange. So that was like one thing. And then the other was to expand the orange area for small hotels. So what I said was that we are seriously looking at considering the expansion because it makes a lot of sense. But we're not probably at this point not leaning towards that central, whatever you want to call it, that blue area, which is kind of a standalone area on Biltmore Avenue, not changing that. So Vedilla, maybe you could just go up to that area also. And there's some existing hotels in that area.
The Aloft is right there.
Right.
That spot. Yep.
I mean, staff still feels like that is probably an okay place for large hotels. It's got good access on Biltmore Avenue and still proximity to downtown.
Okay, so you're saying council wanted orange and we're going to leave it blue potentially.
Well, they asked us to consider extending it or turning it orange, right?
Okay.
Unless again, this is what this conversation is for. Like, if you all have a strong feelings either way, we'd like to hear those.
That's where those houses are.
Mm-hmm. The houses that are being turned into a hotel.
I was about to ask, does anybody on staff remember? That's like 20 rooms? I mean, it's really small.
Well,
I know it's connected to the tower too. Under construction.
Right. I think it's all part of the one project. So I think it's like is it at least 70 some rooms, right? I don't have my.
Yeah. I think the houses by themselves were like 20 some rooms, but then when you add it to the new construction, it ended up being like, some close to 70, something like that.
I don't know. I mean, part of me feels like, and seeing this, can you zoom out just a little bit, Vedilla, like seeing that 200 square foot bubble, like, and knowing that the one project is going on. I realize that in 50 years, that project may not be there, but in 50 years, this overlay district is probably going to change anyway. But to me, it seems like there's an argument to be made for turning that into a small hotel area because there's not really any parcels necessarily that would work for a large hotel and meet a buffer. Like, I mean, you could, but it's the orange peel or the houses that they're going to renovate right now. Like, Yeah.
There are a couple of larger lots. Let's see here, if we zoom in. Where's the, oh, right. Hilliard here. A couple of larger lots here. You know, that are vacant currently.
Well, but I think what I was getting at is if you put that 200-foot bubble around it, then you couldn't build any hotel, right? I mean, the houses are the two just south of Hilliard, or well, not the two. The first one right next to Hilliard is Andy's heating old place. And then there's, yeah, those two right there are the houses, right? So if you do a bubble around there, do you have any parcel between that and the loft that you can put another one in?
Right, I see what you're saying, because we use this address as the marker, but really it incorporates these three properties.
Yeah, that bubble really needs to go up to, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So it's probably, that's the one thing about, we haven't really done a lot of, since we kind of threw the bubble map out there, we haven't done any in-depth analysis of what that's going to mean. So that's a good point, Joe. Okay. Any other questions about the map or concerns or thoughts that you might want to share? All right. That was the large part of the discussion with council centered on the map. We did talk a little bit about the public benefits, and some of the main considerations were to not require LEED certification for the green building options. That council felt pretty strongly about that. So we are, I think we're looking at just requiring like a letter from a licensed architect or to say that it's, but not making folks go through the whole certification process. And then the other things were deepening of the affordability options. So we're looking at adding some additional requirements. Council was asking us to look at requiring more points for different levels of affordability. But we have worked with our community development office, and we feel like we can increase the amount per room to go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and then let community development actually look at, then it would give them more flexibility in where they put the money based on what projects are coming into them. So that's where we've landed on that for the most part. Does that am I explaining myself? I'm not the best at explaining affordable housing stuff. So are there questions about that?
I think I follow on that one. On the sustainability one, I would, if you're looking at eliminating the LEED certification, I still think it needs to be that a HERS rater or someone else, like the building has to be tested. It needs to be a third-party documentation, and whether or not they get the actual LEED certificate, because that's like a whole nother cost and a whole nother level. But I think it needs to be more than just a letter from someone saying, yeah, we did this.
Yeah, and we're looking into specifically what that process would be and how we would frame that. But that's exactly right, because I mean, you wouldn't want just their own architect to write them a letter because they're already on the job or something. That you could see how that would be fraught with some potential problems.
We could require, not an architect on the project, I guess, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I've actually always thought that we should require LEED certification, but I do understand that it is, expensive. So trying to find some in between, way to certify without the full LEED certification. We had included the Green Globes option because our understanding was it was not as expensive to go through to get that type of certification. So I think we still need to dig in a little bit more to that and try to find a way to require some authentication that the building actually meets the LEED standards without maybe requiring the full LEED certification.
Or just that it meets, some of those other kind of generally accepted sustainability standards. And, I'm sure you guys know, there's several raters in town. You could probably call and kind of get input on what that is. But I don't know everything about it, but I do know you can get those ratings done, and then getting that certification is yet a whole nother.
It's a whole nother step, right?
Yeah, and it's that whole, and I think that's the chunk of money that's
Yeah.
Exactly. No,
another pill to swallow.
Right.
Yeah, and I know that hers is only for houses, so that wouldn't work. The thing is that, at least for LEED, it's third party and it's the contractor and the architect, and they're all certifying that what they're doing is sustainable. So there would probably have to be consultants signing off on it for the project.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit tricky to figure out exactly what that sweet spot is, what exactly we would require. But we're continuing to do some research on that as well.
I mean, I guess the one benefit is that, and I guess this will get to another point that, came up in both of the council work sessions I listened to, particularly from Councilman Haynes. The LEED standard part, it's up there in the points rating. It requires them to do a lot. And, it seems like what some of the community, and again, Councilman Haynes brought this up, is to want to limit hotels. And the idea of having this ordinance and this overlay is so that we don't have them coming through as much. So that it's harder to have a hotel, period, no matter what. So, maybe it is just saying it needs to be LEED certified to get that many points, period. If there's not another good way to make it work, to verify that it has met those standards.
Right. There's a lot of opinions about this. So. But we appreciate yours.
I can only imagine.
And I think we've kind of gone back and forth a few times. So hopefully we'll land on the right place, land in the right place. We're looking into contracting, requiring minority and women-owned business enterprises to be required. Vedilla, I know we talked about this. I wasn't sure where what kind of research you had done on that. I don't know if you can add anything to that. Are we still? Were you able to add this to the table?
No, not yet.
Okay, all right. So we're still looking at that. And then another thing that council brought up was linking the transportation benefit to the provision of living wages. They felt like if a hotelier were to provide living wages, then they could get the additional points for the transportation for bus passes or whatever for their employees. But they didn't want that to be just be given out without linking it. So that's a pretty easy thing for us to do.
I wanted to comment on the bus pass issue. And I have a little bit of a problem in that you want the developer to utilize the city transportation, and yet it might be a better option for them to go out similar to the way the Biltmore Estate does and operate a pickup and drop off for their employees that work there. And whether if they use a low emissions or zero emissions vehicle or something like that, but you're kind of limiting the employees to live within the city limits, and we know that most of the people that are occupying those jobs are having to live outside the city, and it may be that the hotelier would prefer to offer a transportation system to pick up and drop them off.
Yeah, we can look at expanding that requirement. I think that's a good point.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Carl.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's pretty much what council, those were their main concerns. I guess I should have probably started off saying, I think that for the most part, they supported the process and the regulations that we were proposing in concept. They seem to be supportive of the design review board at this point. So that's really all that we have to report back from their concerns. So like I said, we're planning a few of these things, we've got to look at it in a little bit more depth. And your input's important. We're also, we are going to be updating the Downtown Commission and the Riverfront Redevelopment Commission as well next week. And the week after. So, and once we get all that input, then we will be coming back to you. And like we talked about at the beginning of the meeting, planning to come back December 2nd. Prior to that meeting, we would have all of the revisions to the ordinance, to the map and everything to you all, as well as up on the website. And then tentatively, either December 17th or January 6th, we would have the vote. So we might want to see what happens at the December 2nd meeting. We could also have, I guess, a continuation of the discussion if we had to as well. But then otherwise on to council January 26th, and then for their review, and then February 9th for adoption. And that would meet the end of February is February 24th, I think, is when the moratorium expires.
Commissioner Kuhn, is there a consensus on council that they're willing to allow any hotel to go through without their direct hand on it, i.e. through a staff approval process?
Well, I think what we heard, we didn't hear outright that they were saying no, they wouldn't allow it. But with a lot of the pulling back of the map, and if we were to make the threshold of 100 rooms instead of maybe 115, and if we were to add the buffer, we could result in an almost de facto situation, or at least it would be much more limited. But I think that's mainly what we heard from them, that they wanted to see these limitations put on it, but we didn't hear outright that they didn't support a staff review at any threshold.
I just wanted to clarify whether or not this moratorium was an effort to actually come up with a way, a path for a hotel to know what's going on, or if it was just a delay tactic and we end up where we started.
I understand. I mean, our staff has always been working under our guidance has been to develop this process to address the concerns that were raised at the beginning. And so cannot speak for council.
Carl, after listening to the latest council work session on it, I mean, if you had asked me that question right after, I would have been like, I don't know. It was hard for me personally to tell. Again, kind of like Stacy said, I didn't hear any no, we don't want it to just be staff review, but there also wasn't a yes, we're okay with it. So I don't know.
I think the mayor did raise that question to the rest of the council during the work session, just to kind of remind them that some of the things that they were asking could result in that, but that's still not the direction that we've been given. So we're proceeding to just try to, amend the overlay and keep the rest of the process that we put together intact.
Well, I know I've said it before, but thanks to you, Stacy and Vedilla and Shannon and everybody on staff who's working on it. I mean, I feel like it's coming together good, and I hope that the rest of the community, will see some benefit out of it.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, well, thank you all. Thanks for your time tonight and for your feedback. It was helpful.
Thank you.
Do we technically have to make a motion to
continue? Yes.
Continue.
Phase 2, both the zoning map amendment and the zoning text amendment to December 2nd.
Okay, I would make a motion to continue the wording amendment and the zoning map amendment to the December 2nd planning and zoning meeting.
I will second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Passes unanimously.
Can just take a motion to adjourn if there's no other business.
Motion to adjourn, but before that, I would like to congratulate our new council person.
Here, here.
Hey, we're sorry to see you go, Sandra, but congratulations, and we're excited that we get to keep working with you in the city. So,
yep, congratulations, Sandra.
Bye, everyone.
Motion or second.
Okay.
On the motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you.